Greetings, wanderers. Tonight, we drift back to prehistoric times when the largest volcanic eruption in human history nearly ended our species before we'd properly gotten started. A supervolcano in Indonesia exploded with the force of 1,000 nuclear weapons, plunging the world into volcanic winter and reducing global population to fewer than 10,000. If these stories of impossible survival bring you comfort and peace of mind, I'd appreciate a like and subscribe. And before you drift away, do leave a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is there. I'm always curious how these old stories find you. Very well, it's time we settle in, dim the lights, and discover how humans survived this volcanic winter apocalypse against all odds. Picture Mount Toba, a supervolcano in northern Sumatra, 74,000 years ago, as it prepares to commit geological murder while you, Homo sapiens, 3,000 miles away in the Middle Sun Valley of India, go about your daily life completely unaware. You're chipping stone tools by the river, collecting berries, maybe arguing with your cousin about who gets the best fishing spot. Just another day in the Pleistocene neighborhood. Meanwhile, across the Bay of Bengal, Mount Toba is swelling like an infected wound, bulging 3,000 feet above the Indonesian jungle. But you have no idea that this mountain is about to ruin everyone's decade. The warning signs have been building for months. Springs around Toba bubble with sulfurous gases that smell like the world's worst breakfast. Trees die in perfect circles around volcanic vents. Animals flee the area with the kind of urgency usually reserved for predators. But you're 3,000 miles away in your river valley, watching normal monsoon clouds and thinking your biggest problem is whether to fish upstream or down. Any humans living within 100 kilometers of the volcano, possibly including other human species, are about to become very dead very quickly. Fortunately, you are not in this immediate death zone. When Mount Toba finally decides it's had enough of being a mountain, the explosion will make every nuclear weapon humanity will ever build look like a disappointing firecracker. When Toba explodes, it ejects an unimaginable amount of volcanic material with a sound you can actually hear across the subcontinent. You pause in your daily activities as the loudest sound in 28 million years reaches your ears, though you have no idea what caused it. Only two things in Earth's history ever roared louder: the asteroid that killed the dinosaurs and another supervolcano so big and so ancient, humanity hadn't yet arrived to hear it. The sonic boom travels around the Earth 7 times. You feel the ground shake beneath your feet, but think nothing of it. Maybe a distant landslide, you figure. Maybe the gods are rearranging furniture. You have no concept of what's actually happening 3,000 miles away, where the laws of physics are having a very public breakdown. Back at ground zero, deadly surges of ash, gas, and volcanic debris burst outward at 600 miles per hour, instantly killing everything within a 20,000 square kilometer area. These aren't just hot winds. They're 1,800-degree rivers of gas and rock fragments moving so fast that even if you had a modern sports car, you couldn't outrun them. Anyone caught in these flows doesn't die. They simply cease to exist, vaporized in seconds. Within hours, meters of ash bury the immediate region while you continue your Stone Age life at sites like Dhaba in the Middle Sun Valley, still unaware of the approaching catastrophe. The immediate blast zone looks like the surface of an alien planet. Gray, lifeless, buried under ash deeper than most trees are tall. Everyone and everything at ground zero is annihilated instantly. No dramatic last stands, no heroic escapes. You remain blissfully ignorant of this geological deletion. Death comes so fast there's no time for fear or pain. One moment, you're a living creature. The next, you're part of the ash layer that archaeologists will study 74,000 years in the future. The ash cloud rises 32 kilometers into the atmosphere, officially entering we're all completely screwed territory, and it's heading directly toward your homeland. For perspective, that's higher than 3 Mount Everests stacked on top of each other. The eruption column looks like a nuclear mushroom cloud on steroids. Your Homo sapiens cousins in Africa are the lucky ones, distant enough to avoid the worst of Toba's wrath, but you're close enough to face the full fury of the volcanic winter. You're about to get buried under 5 centimeters of the stuff, turning your familiar landscape into an alien wasteland. Within days, thick ash begins falling across your landscape. It's not just dust, it's microscopic glass shards mixed with heavier debris. The air becomes unbreathable without covering your nose and mouth. Every surface turns gray. Rivers clog with ash. The familiar world disappears under a blanket of volcanic glass. By day 5, ash is already accumulating across the Indian subcontinent where you live. Each day brings more ash, thicker and heavier, until walking becomes difficult and breathing becomes an adventure in respiratory irritation. The eruption itself lasts only 9 to 14 days, but those 2 weeks have unleashed years of dark and deadly volcanic winter that you're going to have to survive. This isn't just bad weather. This is a fundamental reorganization of how Earth's climate works, and you get front row seats to the apocalypse. The sky begins to change color like a very ominous Instagram filter. At first, it's subtle. The usual bright blue develops a grayish tint that makes everything look slightly off, like someone adjusted the contrast on reality. You notice it, but don't think much of it. Weather changes, after all, but this change isn't going away. The familiar azure dome that has stretched over your valley for thousands of generations is transforming into something alien and threatening. Sunlight drops by 25 to 90% across different regions, turning noon into perpetual twilight across the northern hemisphere. Where you live in India, the reduction is severe. What used to be blazing tropical sunshine becomes the kind of dim light you'd expect just before a thunderstorm. Except the storm never comes and the light never gets brighter. This is your new normal, and it's going to last for years. The sun still rises each morning, but it's like looking at it through multiple layers of dirty cloth. Even at midday, you can stare directly at it without hurting your eyes, which should be impossible, but has become your terrifying reality. The sky takes on a gray hue during the day and glows red at night. Nature's way of saying abandon hope. During what should be daylight hours, everything looks like it's been filmed through a dirty window. The familiar blue that once stretched endlessly above your valley is replaced by an oppressive gray ceiling that seems to press down on the landscape. But at night, the sky becomes genuinely terrifying. A deep red glow spreads across the horizon, like the world is on fire just beyond the hills. Your ancestors have no reference point for this. It's not natural, and it's not going away. The red glow isn't uniform either. It pulses and shifts, creating an unsettling light show that makes everyone in your group nervous and sleepless. Global temperatures plummet 3 to 5 degrees Celsius, with some areas dropping up to 15 degrees. Your region faces some of the harshest conditions outside the immediate blast zone. This doesn't sound like much until you realize that a 3-degree drop is the difference between tropical paradise and barely habitable. In some parts of the northern hemisphere, the temperature drop is catastrophic. Growing seasons disappear. Rainfall patterns collapse. What used to be predictable becomes completely chaotic. The thermal equilibrium that has governed weather patterns for millennia is shattered, creating a climate system that operates by entirely new rules. Your Indian homeland becomes uncomfortably arid and cold, disrupting every ecosystem you depend on far more severely than distant Africa. The monsoons, which your people have relied on for thousands of generations, become unreliable at best. Rivers that used to flow year-round now run dry for months. The lush forests start thinning out, leaves turning brown and falling even though it's not the right season. Everything you know about your environment is becoming wrong. The humid, tropical climate that shaped your ancestors' entire way of life is vanishing, replaced by something that feels more like a cold desert than the verdant landscape you inherited. Flowers simply stop blooming, which sounds minor until you realize the entire food chain depends on them. No flowers means no fruit. No pollination means no seeds for next year's plants. The bees and butterflies that used to fill your world start disappearing. Without pollinators, even the plants that survive the initial climate shock struggle to reproduce. You're watching the bottom of the food chain crumble in real time. The colorful blooms that once marked the changing seasons and provided navigation landmarks across your territory have vanished, leaving behind a monotonous landscape of brown and gray. Trees die during what used to be growing seasons, creating landscapes that look like nuclear winter. Ancient trees that have stood for centuries start dropping their leaves and never growing them back. Forests become graveyards of dead wood. The familiar green canopy that provided shelter, food, and materials for tools transforms into a skeletal wasteland. Walking through these dead forests feels like moving through the bones of the world. The massive trunks that once reached toward the sky now stand like monuments to a lost world, their bare branches creating eerie silhouettes against the perpetually gray sky. Large mammals like deer and wild boar become thin and starve, providing little fat for the predators, including you who depend on them. The animals you've hunted for generations start looking gaunt and weak. Their usual migration patterns become erratic as they search desperately for food and water. Even when you manage to hunt successfully, the meat is lean and tough, lacking the fat content your body needs to survive harsh conditions. The robust herds that once provided reliable protein sources are dwindling rapidly, forcing you to completely rethink your hunting strategies and dietary expectations. The air smells perpetually of sulfur and ash, like someone left rotten eggs burning in a campfire for months. Every breath carries the taste of volcanic fallout. It's not just unpleasant. It's a constant reminder that your world has fundamentally changed. The clean, fresh air you once took for granted is now thick with microscopic particles that irritate your nose and throat with every inhalation. The familiar sense of your environment, blooming flowers, fresh earth after rain, the green smell of growing plants have been replaced by the acrid stench of geological catastrophe. Breathing becomes an adventure in respiratory irritation, with constant coughing and sore throats becoming your new normal. The fine ash particles aren't just sitting on surfaces, they're suspended in the air you breathe. Your respiratory system wasn't designed to filter volcanic glass, and it shows. Everyone in your group develops a persistent cough that never quite goes away. Throat irritation becomes so common that clear, comfortable breathing feels like a luxury. Children and elders suffer the most, their smaller or more fragile respiratory systems struggling to cope with the constant assault of microscopic glass shards. This delightful new climate will persist for 6 to 10 years, because apparently the universe believes in long-term commitment to misery. 6 to 10 years might not sound like much in modern terms, but for hunter-gatherers living day to day, it's a lifetime. Children will grow up having never seen normal weather. Adults will spend their prime years struggling against conditions their ancestors never faced. This isn't a bad season you wait out. It's a new world you have to learn to survive in. The volcanic winter represents more than just harsh conditions. It's a complete reset of everything your people know about living on Earth. Some cooling effects will last up to 1,000 years, turning this into the geological equivalent of the world's longest bad day. Your Indian homeland bears some of the heaviest ash fall outside the immediate blast zone. While the worst effects will fade after a decade, the climate won't fully return to pre-Toba conditions for centuries. The ice sheets that start forming during the volcanic winter will take hundreds of years to fully melt. You're not just surviving a disaster, you're adapting to a fundamentally different planet. The cooling trend will influence ocean currents, weather patterns, and seasonal cycles for longer than human civilization will exist. Rivers begin drying up, concentrating what water remains into smaller and smaller pools. Your future lifeline in the Middle Sun Valley. The river that runs through your territory, once a reliable source of fresh water, starts shrinking month by month. What used to be a flowing waterway becomes a chain of disconnected pools. This seems like a disaster, but it's actually going to save your life in ways you can't yet imagine. As the water level drops, fish become concentrated in these shrinking pools, creating opportunities that don't exist during normal times. The usual seasonal monsoon patterns disappear, replaced by a monotonous cycle of gray skies and failed harvests that your ancestors have never experienced. For thousands of generations, your people have timed their lives around predictable rains. Planting, gathering, migration, everything followed the rhythm of wet and dry seasons. Now that rhythm is broken. The rains come at the wrong times or don't come at all, or arrive as brief, violent storms that cause more harm than good. The sophisticated environmental knowledge passed down through countless generations becomes suddenly useless, forcing you to develop entirely new survival strategies. 5 centimeters of ash blanket the Indian subcontinent where you live, enough to bury your footprints and turn every breath into a grinding reminder of the catastrophe. This ash isn't like snow that melts away. It's microscopic volcanic glass that gets into everything. Your food, your water, your clothes, your lungs. Walking through, it feels like walking through gray sand that never settles. Every step kicks up clouds of irritating particles that coat your skin and burn your eyes. The ash layer is thick enough to completely change the landscape's appearance, turning familiar landmarks into unrecognizable gray mounds. The seasonal rains that your ancestors have depended on for countless generations become unreliable, turning familiar landscapes into unpredictable survival challenges. Your people have developed their entire way of life around knowing when and where water will be available. Now that knowledge is useless. Springs that always flowed during certain seasons dry up completely. Rivers change course as ash clogs their channels. Even when rain does fall, it often comes as acidic precipitation that damages plants and contaminates water sources, creating new dangers that your ancestors never had to consider. Your Middle Sun River Valley becomes a crucial lifeline, as the river systems provide the only reliable water sources in an increasingly arid landscape. While other areas see their water sources completely disappear, your valley still has flowing water, even if it's reduced to a fraction of its former volume. This geographical luck isn't just convenient, it's the difference between survival and extinction for your group. The valley's topography helps funnel what little precipitation still falls, maintaining water flow even as the broader region becomes increasingly desiccated. The forests you knew disappear, replaced by grasslands as trees give way to grasses, forcing a complete reimagining of food sources and shelter materials. The change happens slowly at first, then accelerates. Trees that lose their leaves never regrow them. Clearings that used to be temporary become permanent. The diverse forest ecosystem that provided dozens of different food sources transforms into monotonous grassland with far fewer options. Everything you know about finding food, building shelter, and making tools has to be completely relearned. The transition from forest to grassland represents a fundamental shift in available resources and survival strategies. The ash doesn't just fall and stay. It moves through your environment for years, constantly reshaping the terrain and creating new challenges. Wind carries the ash particles from place to place, creating dunes where none existed before. Seasonal rains wash ash into valleys and streams, constantly changing the landscape. Just when you think you've adapted to the new conditions, the ash shifts again, filling in water sources or exposing new ones, creating an environment that's never quite stable. This constant change means that survival strategies must remain flexible and adaptive, rather than relying on fixed knowledge about the environment. You are now officially living through the largest volcanic catastrophe in human evolutionary history, and you're in one of the worst-hit regions outside Ground Zero. This isn't just another environmental challenge that your ancestors overcame. This is unprecedented in the entire span of human existence. No one has ever faced anything like this before. There are no ancestral memories to draw on, no traditional knowledge that applies. You're going to have to figure out how to survive this completely on your own, and the decisions you make in the coming months will determine whether your species has a future. The magnitude of this challenge cannot be overstated. You're facing conditions that would test the limits of modern civilization, armed only with Stone Age technology and your own ingenuity. While your Neanderthal cousins up north are built like walking heaters and probably handling this better than you need different strategies. Those relatives of yours have barrel-shaped chests and shortened limbs that maximize heat production while minimizing heat loss. Their wide noses are perfectly designed to warm and moisten the cold, dry air that's become standard across much of the northern hemisphere. Meanwhile, you're built more like a long-distance runner than a space heater, which is great for chasing antelope across savannas, but less helpful when the world turns into a freezer. The Neanderthals have brains that are actually larger than yours, about 4 to 5% bigger. And they're using every bit of that extra brain power to survive through individual excellence and technological solutions. They're incredibly skilled hunters who can take down massive prey animals using sophisticated stone tools and coordinated tactics. You, on the other hand, are essentially the evolutionary equivalent of a scrappy underdog who's about to get very creative very quickly. But there's a crucial difference in how you approach problems. While they're perfecting what they already do well, you're willing to completely reinvent how you live. This isn't necessarily because you're smarter. It might just be because you don't have the luxury of being good enough at traditional methods to stick with them when conditions change. Your pre-Toba diet was mostly land animals. Antelope, pigs, monkeys, standard Stone Age fare that's now becoming scarce in the changing Indian landscape. For thousands of years, your people have perfected the art of hunting terrestrial mammals. You know their migration patterns, their watering spots, their seasonal behaviors. The knowledge passed down through generations includes reading animal signs, understanding herd dynamics, and timing hunts to coincide with optimal conditions. But all that expertise is becoming increasingly useless as your familiar prey animals start disappearing or behaving erratically. The antelope that once migrated predictably through your territory now follow completely different routes, if they migrate at all. The wild pigs that used to be abundant in the forested areas have largely vanished as their food sources disappear. The animals you used to hunt are either dead, dying, or acting completely unpredictably as their own food sources collapse. Deer that once followed reliable migration routes now wander aimlessly, searching for vegetation that no longer exists. Wild boar that used to be fat and slow are now lean and desperate, making them dangerous to approach. The entire terrestrial ecosystem that supported your hunting lifestyle is falling apart piece by piece. As rivers in the Middle Sun Valley dry into isolated waterholes, you make a discovery that will save your species: trapped fish. This isn't some brilliant flash of inspiration. It's more like stumbling across the world's most obvious survival hack. As the water level drops month by month, fish that once had an entire river system to hide in become concentrated in increasingly smaller pools. They literally have nowhere to go. The transformation happens gradually at first, then accelerates. What begins as a flowing river becomes a series of connected pools, then isolated ponds, then finally just scattered waterholes separated by dry riverbed. Each stage of this process concentrates the fish population more densely, making them easier to catch. You're essentially watching nature create the perfect fishing conditions through environmental catastrophe. Some of these pools contain fish populations that have been isolated for months, creating dense concentrations of protein that would have been impossible to achieve under normal river conditions. The fish can't escape, can't migrate to better feeding areas, and have nowhere to hide from your fishing efforts. It's almost embarrassingly easy compared to the complex hunting strategies you've had to master for terrestrial prey. The fish are literally stuck in shrinking pools, making them like fish in a barrel for easy harvesting. The phrase hasn't been invented yet, but the concept is playing out right in front of you. These aren't just any fish either. They're the bigger, older fish that survived in the deeper parts of the river, now trapped in pools that are sometimes no deeper than your waist. It's like the volcanic winter has created a seafood buffet that restocks itself daily. You begin processing 4 times more fish than before the eruption, showing rapid dietary flexibility your cousins lack. Archaeological evidence from sites like Dhaba shows this dramatic shift in your diet. Fish bones suddenly become much more common in the refuse piles around your settlements. This isn't just a minor adjustment. It's a complete overhaul of your entire nutritional strategy. You're essentially switching from being primarily terrestrial hunters to freshwater fishers almost overnight. The scale of this dietary shift is remarkable. Before Toba, fish were not your main source of protein, merely supplementing the meat from land animals. After the eruption, that ratio flips completely. Fish becomes your primary protein source, fundamentally changing not just what you eat, but how you organize your daily life around food procurement. Unlike the Neanderthals who specialize in hunting large land mammals, you're willing to eat whatever's available in your transformed environment. This flexibility isn't necessarily a sign of superior intelligence. It's more like being the least picky eater in the family when everyone else is starving. While your northern cousins are stubbornly trying to find the increasingly rare large mammals they're specialized to hunt, you're happily munching on whatever protein source presents itself. Your dietary opportunism extends beyond just fish. You start experimenting with aquatic plants, water birds, amphibians, and anything else that lives in or near your shrinking water sources. Frogs, turtles, water insects, even aquatic vegetation becomes part of your expanded menu. This isn't gourmet dining, but it's calories, and calories are what keep you alive during a global climate catastrophe. The landscape transforms from flowing river to scattered waterholes. each one a concentrated protein source waiting to be harvested. What seems like an environmental disaster is actually creating the easiest fishing conditions in human history. Instead of trying to catch fish in a flowing river where they can escape upstream or downstream, you're dealing with fish that are essentially trapped in natural aquariums. Some of these pools are so isolated that the fish have been there for months, growing fat on whatever insects and plant matter fall into their shrinking world. The productivity of these isolated pools is sometimes astounding. A single waterhole can contain enough fish to feed your entire group for days. The concentration effect means that a few hours of fishing can yield more protein than days of traditional hunting under normal conditions. You're learning to identify the most productive pools and timing your fishing efforts to maximize efficiency. The key difference between you and other human species, they're specialists. You're the ultimate generalist. Neanderthals are incredibly good at what they do. But what they do is hunt large mammals in cold conditions using close-quarters combat techniques. You're masters of figuring things out as you go along. It's not the most impressive ability, but it turns out to be the most useful one during unprecedented global catastrophes. This generalist approach extends beyond just diet. While other human species have evolved specialized physical adaptations for specific environments, you've evolved specialized behavioral adaptations for changing environments. Your advantage isn't being perfectly suited to any particular condition. It's being adequately suited to whatever conditions you encounter and being willing to change your behavior when those conditions change. While they stick to what they know best, you're busy reinventing your entire survival strategy in real time. Your Neanderthal cousins are still trying to hunt mammoth and reindeer using the same techniques their ancestors perfected over thousands of years. It's admirable dedication to tradition. But tradition isn't going to feed anyone when the mammoths are all dead, and the reindeer have moved 1,000 miles north chasing the retreating ice sheets. This flexibility will prove to be your evolutionary advantage, even if it doesn't look impressive compared to Neanderthal brawn. There's nothing particularly heroic about switching from hunting antelope to catching trapped fish. It's not the kind of survival story that gets told around campfires for generations. But it's the kind of practical adaptation that keeps you alive when more dramatic survival strategies fail. You're not stronger or more cold adapted, but you're more willing to completely change your lifestyle when necessary. This willingness to abandon traditional methods isn't necessarily wisdom. It might just be desperation combined with a lack of strong cultural traditions to break. Whatever the reason, it's working. While other human populations struggle to maintain their traditional ways of life, you're busy inventing entirely new ones. The waterhole strategy works because you're smart enough to follow the water as it concentrates into smaller areas. As rivers shrink, you don't just sit by your old fishing spots waiting for the water to return. You track the receding water, setting up temporary camps near the most productive pools. You learn to read the landscape for signs of where water might collect and concentrate, turning environmental knowledge into survival advantage. Understanding topography becomes as important as understanding animal behavior. You develop a keen understanding of which valleys will retain water longest and where underground springs might emerge when surface water disappears. This environmental knowledge becomes crucial for planning your movements and ensuring access to both water and the concentrated fish populations that depend on it. As waterholes shrink, you don't just fish, you hunt the animals that come to drink at the remaining water sources. The few waterholes that remain become natural choke points where all the surviving terrestrial animals have to congregate. Deer, wild boar, and smaller mammals all need water, and they all have to come to the same few places to get it. You position yourself at these natural gathering spots and wait for dinner to come to you. This represents a fundamental shift in hunting strategy from pursuit to ambush. Instead of tracking animals across large territories, you identify the critical resources they can't do without and control access to those resources. It's more efficient and less energy-intensive than traditional hunting methods, which becomes important when you need to conserve calories during harsh conditions. You develop new techniques for fish processing and preservation, maximizing nutrition from each catch. Fresh fish spoils quickly even in the cooler post-Toba conditions, so you experiment with smoking, drying, and other preservation methods. You figure out which parts of the fish provide the most nutrition and which can be safely discarded. Every aspect of your fishing operation becomes more efficient as you refine your techniques. The learning curve for fish processing proves remarkably steep. Within months, you've developed methods for gutting, cleaning, and preserving fish that would be recognizable to any fishing culture. You learn to identify which fish are safe to eat and which might be contaminated by the ash-laden water. You discover that certain preparation methods make fish more digestible and nutritious. The coastal populations discover that marine resources are less affected by volcanic winter than terrestrial ecosystems. While your inland rivers are drying up, the ocean-based food webs remain relatively stable. Coastal groups start focusing more heavily on shellfish, seaweed, and marine fish, discovering that the ocean's thermal mass helps buffer it against the worst effects of the climate catastrophe. This creates a sustainable survival system even as the larger ecosystem collapses around you. While the terrestrial world is falling apart, the aquatic ecosystems prove more resilient. Fish populations, while concentrated, remain healthy in most waterholes. You've essentially found a stable ecological niche in the middle of a planetary disaster, and you're going to ride it out for as long as it takes for the world to recover. But even with your fish trapping mastery providing protein, you still need better hunting techniques for the full range of nutrients that keep your tribe alive. The volcanic winter coincides with your development of the bow and arrow, the oldest evidence dating to exactly 74,000 years ago, as if the universe decided you needed better weapons precisely when everything else went to hell. You're crafting small, symmetrical triangular projectile points at sites like Shinfamidama. And archaeologists will one day marvel at the timing of this innovation during humanity's darkest hour. Small, symmetrical triangular projectile points appear at survival sites across your range, allowing you to hunt smaller, faster prey when the big game becomes scarce or dies off entirely. These aren't crude spear tips. They're precision-engineered projectiles that require forward planning and sophisticated understanding of physics that your brain, smaller than a Neanderthal's, somehow manages to figure out. This necessity drives innovation. When large animals become thin and starve during the volcanic winter, you need weapons that can take down quick, small targets like rabbits and birds, rather than the massive antelope and wild boar you used to hunt. Your survival depends on adapting to smaller, faster prey that can hide in whatever vegetation remains. Your Denisovan relatives up in the mountains have genetic advantages for high-altitude living, including a special gene that helps them process oxygen efficiently in thin air. But you have technological innovation instead of biological superpowers. They're naturally adapted to harsh conditions, while you're busy inventing your ticket out of them with pointy sticks and string. While they're using their superior genetics to breathe easily at altitude, where volcanic ash makes the air even thinner, you're down in the river valleys crafting better hunting tools with nothing but stone, wood, and determination. It's a classic case of working smarter when working harder is not enough. Though smarter here means really good at making long-distance murder sticks. Your advanced stone-shaping technique, the same sophisticated methods your people use in Africa, continues unchanged through the disaster, proving that even when the world ends, good craftsmanship is always reliable. You're still pre-shaping stone cores for later tool making, a technique that requires the kind of forward planning that separates you from every other species on the planet. But it's about making tools that work, not tools that look pretty. Archaeological evidence shows your ancestors have lived continuously in this exact Middle Sun River Valley for 80,000 years. And this disaster won't be the end of that remarkable streak. You're part of a survival tradition that stretches back dozens of millennia. And adding survived supervolcano to the family resume feels appropriate given the overachieving nature of your lineage. The bow and arrow gives you accuracy and range that throwing spears simply can't match, turning you from a close-quarters fighter into a sharpshooter. Instead of getting within stabbing distance of potentially dangerous prey, you can kill efficiently from 20 or 30 meters away, which is the difference between dinner and becoming dinner yourself. You start with simple self-bows carved from whatever wood survives the volcanic winter conditions. Birch, if you're lucky, or any flexible wood that hasn't died from the prolonged gray skies. The engineering is surprisingly sophisticated. You need wood that's strong enough to store energy but flexible enough to bend without snapping, all while maintaining consistent performance in cold, damp conditions. The arrows require precision crafting that would impress a modern engineer. Each point must be perfectly balanced and aerodynamically sound, or your shot goes wide and your dinner escapes. You're essentially handcrafting ballistic missiles using Stone Age technology, complete with fletching made from bird feathers that help stabilize flight paths with the same aerodynamic principles used in airplane design today. This technology development happens before major human dispersal from Africa, giving you a crucial advantage over other populations who will encounter you later. You're not just surviving the volcanic winter. You're emerging from it with superior weapons technology that will help you colonize environments other human species can't handle. Unlike the Neanderthals who rely on close quarters hunting with thrusting spears, requiring them to get dangerously close to potentially aggressive prey, you can hunt from a distance with the casual efficiency of a medieval archer. Their hunting strategy requires them to be stronger and tougher, while yours just requires better aim and the patience to practice. Your arrow points are carefully crafted using the same stone-shaping technique you've mastered over thousands of years, showing the kind of forward planning that other human species struggle with. Each point represents hours of careful work, selecting the right stone, understanding its grain, predicting how it will fracture, then executing dozens of precise strikes to create something lethal and beautiful. The learning curve is steep. Archery requires months of practice to achieve hunting-level accuracy, unlike throwing a spear, which any reasonably coordinated person can manage in a few tries. You're essentially learning to be a sniper using equipment you built yourself, developing muscle memory for distance estimation, wind compensation, and target tracking that would challenge modern hunters. But once mastered, the bow allows one person to hunt effectively where traditional methods would require group efforts and careful coordination. Suddenly, a single skilled archer can provide for their family without organizing elaborate group hunts that require multiple people risking their lives in close combat with large animals. This represents a fundamental shift from opportunistic hunting to strategic, planned predation. You're not just reacting to whatever animal wanders by. You're actively seeking specific prey, planning approach routes, and executing coordinated attacks with the precision of a modern military operation. The bow transforms hunting from a desperate scramble for survival into something approaching an art form. The technology spreads through your populations, showing the social learning abilities that set you apart from other human species. When someone in your group figures out a better way to fletch arrows or selects superior wood for bow making, that knowledge spreads to other groups through your social networks over months and years. While your hobbit relatives on Flores Island are mastering island resource management thousands of miles away, you're mastering projectile warfare in your ash-covered river valley. Different human species are developing different survival specializations, but yours happens to be the one that scales well beyond local conditions. The combination of new weapons and dietary flexibility creates a survival system that works across multiple environments. Whether you're hunting small game in the volcanic wasteland or tracking fish in the remaining waterholes, the bow gives you options that other species lack. It's the Swiss Army knife of Stone Age survival tools. Most importantly, archery represents something uniquely human about your species: the willingness to invest tremendous time and effort mastering complex technologies that pay off over the long term. A Neanderthal can learn to throw a spear in an afternoon, but learning archery requires the kind of delayed gratification thinking that will eventually allow your species to build pyramids and space programs. The physical act of drawing a bow becomes second nature after months of practice, your shoulder muscles adapting to the repetitive motion of pulling 60 pounds of tension, while your fingers develop calluses from the bowstring. You learn to feel the exact moment of release, that split second when everything, your breathing, your stance, your aim, aligns perfectly before the arrow flies toward its target. The sound becomes familiar too. The whisper of the bowstring, the soft thud of an arrow finding its mark, or the frustrating crack when wood meets stone and your carefully crafted projectile shatters against a rock. Each missed shot represents hours of work lost, but each successful kill means your family eats tonight. You develop an intimate knowledge of your prey's behavior patterns during these harsh years. The few remaining deer move differently in the ash-covered landscape, their hoofprints easier to track in the gray dust, but their feeding patterns completely disrupted. Small game like rabbits and birds adapt faster to the new conditions, requiring you to study their movements with the focus of a modern wildlife biologist. The arrows themselves become precious resources that must be recovered whenever possible. After a successful hunt, you spend careful minutes searching the area around your kill, feeling through tall grass and ash drifts for the wooden shaft that represents so much invested labor. A lost arrow isn't just equipment, it's food that your family won't have tomorrow. Your bow-making process evolves through trial and error across the long volcanic winter years. You learn which woods remain flexible in the perpetual damp conditions, testing each piece by bending it slowly and listening for the tiny creaks that warn of impending failure. The smell of wood shavings becomes associated with hope. Each new bow represents another chance at successful hunting. The psychological advantage proves as important as the practical one. There's something deeply satisfying about the clean efficiency of archery compared to the desperate close-quarters combat required for spear hunting. You're no longer wrestling with wounded animals or risking injury from thrashing hooves and sharp antlers. The bow transforms hunting from physical combat into a mental challenge of patience and precision. Your children grow up watching this technology develop, their young fingers learning to fletch arrows, and their eyes studying the flight patterns that will determine their future survival. They don't remember the time before archery, accepting this innovation as simply part of their world rather than the revolutionary survival tool it represents. The social implications ripple through your small, surviving populations. Successful archers gain status not just as providers, but as teachers, their knowledge becoming as valuable as their hunting skills. Groups begin specializing. Some members focus entirely on bow making, while others perfect their marksmanship, creating the first hints of the technological specialization that will characterize your species. Microscopic glass shards from the Toba eruption will one day be found in the same archaeological layers as your earliest arrow points, providing precise dating that proves the connection between crisis and innovation. Future scientists will marvel at how environmental catastrophe drove technological leaps that wouldn't seem out of place in a modern survival manual. The bow's range extends beyond hunting to defense against the predators that also struggle to find food in the ash-covered landscape. A well-placed arrow can drive off a hungry carnivore without the life-threatening close contact required by spear-based defense. You're essentially creating a protective zone around your camps that extends as far as an arrow can fly. Different groups develop regional variations in their archery technology, each adaptation reflecting local conditions and available materials. Some favor shorter, more maneuverable bows for dense cover, while others create longer bows optimized for the open spaces created by dying forests. These innovations spread through your social networks, creating a rapid evolution in weapons technology driven by environmental pressure. The mathematical precision required for consistent accuracy forces your brain to develop spatial reasoning skills that extend far beyond hunting. Estimating distances, calculating trajectory, and compensating for wind conditions exercises cognitive abilities that will later prove useful for navigation, construction, and the complex planning required for long-distance migration. Your tool technology links Africa to Australia through your position in the Middle Sun Valley, suggesting you're part of the great human expansion that this volcanic winter won't be able to stop. The archery skills developed during these crisis years will prove invaluable when your descendants begin exploring new continents, providing hunting capabilities that work across diverse environments. By the time you've fully adapted to this new reality, archery has become so fundamental to your survival strategy that it's hard to imagine life without it. What began as desperate innovation during humanity's darkest hour has evolved into a technology that will help define your species for the next 70,000 years. Your mastery of archery gives you new hunting capabilities, but even the best weapons are useless without the energy to use them effectively. You maintain controlled fire technology throughout the volcanic winter, maximizing energy extraction from limited food sources when every calorie becomes precious. Cooking becomes essential for getting maximum calories from whatever food you can find in this new harsh world. Raw fish from your shrinking waterholes provides basic nutrition, but cooked fish delivers significantly more usable energy to your body. The heat breaks down tough proteins and cell walls while triggering the Maillard reaction that creates appealing brown flavors, making nutrients more bioavailable and extracting noticeably more calories from the same piece of fish. This survival advantage compounds over months and years of scarcity. While the Neanderthals have bigger brains and more muscle mass, requiring more calories just to maintain their impressive physiques, you're operating more like a fuel-efficient compact car that can go twice as far on the same amount of food. Their stocky, powerful bodies are like SUVs in a world where fuel has become scarce. And this efficiency difference becomes life or death significant during extended periods of scarcity. The metabolic mathematics work in your favor during crisis conditions. Neanderthals needed nearly twice as many calories as you do to maintain their muscular frames and high metabolic rates in cold conditions. Your cooking techniques maximize nutritional extraction from every meal, helping stretch limited resources further. Your fires extend daylight hours during the endless gray days, allowing more time for food processing and tool-making when every hour of productivity matters. The volcanic ash blocks so much sunlight that your effective working day shrinks to just a few usable hours without artificial light. Natural daylight becomes a weak, grayish glow that makes detailed work nearly impossible, forcing you to adapt your entire daily schedule around the limitations of reduced visibility. Fire gives you back those lost hours, letting you process fish, craft arrows, and maintain equipment long after natural light fades to nothing. The warm glow of controlled flames creates a bubble of productivity in the perpetual twilight, allowing essential survival tasks to continue. This is something that all fire-using human species depended on, but your group perfected it into a full survival infrastructure. Evidence from survival sites shows sophisticated hearth construction and maintenance throughout the crisis period. You're not just building random campfires. You're engineering heating and cooking systems optimized for the specific challenges of volcanic winter. Archaeological evidence reveals stone-lined fire pits that retain heat longer, carefully positioned windbreaks that protect flames from constant ash-laden gusts, and elevated cooking surfaces that keep food away from the gritty volcanic debris contaminating everything. These aren't simple campfire rings, but complex thermal management systems designed for maximum efficiency during resource scarcity. Some hearths show evidence of multiple combustion chambers for different purposes, specialized areas for food smoking, and carefully engineered airflow systems that maintain consistent temperatures despite challenging environmental conditions. You're building Stone Age furnaces that would impress modern survival experts. You develop specialized cooking techniques for volcanic winter conditions, including slower burning methods and smoke management in enclosed spaces. Traditional open-air cooking becomes problematic when ash falls constantly from the gray sky, contaminating food and interfering with combustion. You learn to build semi-enclosed cooking areas that protect your food while still allowing proper ventilation, creating controlled environments within the larger environmental chaos. The techniques involve creating draft systems using stone arrangements that pull fresh air into cooking areas, while directing smoke and ash away from food preparation zones. You master the art of banking fires to maintain steady, low heat for extended periods, crucial for processing tough plant materials and preserving meat through smoking. These innovations represent sophisticated understanding of thermal dynamics developed through trial and error during humanity's darkest period. Fire technology allows you to process tough, previously inedible plant materials into usable calories when your usual food sources become unavailable. Roots and tubers that would normally be too fibrous or bitter become palatable and nutritious after long, slow cooking in underground fire pits. You're essentially expanding your dietary options through thermal processing, turning your environment into a larger buffet of survival foods. Underground pit cooking becomes particularly important during the volcanic winter because it provides consistent, gentle heat that can break down the toughest plant fibers. You dig pits, line them with stones, build fires to heat the stones, then cover food with earth and ash to create natural ovens that cook slowly over many hours. This technique transforms inedible fibrous materials into digestible starches and sugars. Fire is the technology that makes this efficiency possible. While Neanderthals might need nearly twice as many calories per day as you do to maintain their muscular frames in cold conditions, your cooking techniques perfected during the crisis maximize nutritional extraction from every meal. The combination of cooking and small body size means you need fewer calories to survive than the muscular Neanderthals, when food sources are severely limited for years at a time. This becomes a crucial survival advantage during the extended crisis period when every calorie saved means another day your family can survive. Your smaller size, once a disadvantage in direct competition with other human species, becomes an asset when resources are scarce and efficiency trumps raw power. This energy efficiency becomes crucial when food sources are severely limited for years at a time, turning your perceived weakness into a survival strength. The same small stature that makes you less imposing in direct confrontation with Neanderthals or Denisovans becomes an advantage when you need to stretch limited resources across entire seasons of scarcity. You're playing a different survival game entirely, one based on efficiency rather than dominance. Your controlled use of fire also provides protection from predators in a world where ecosystems are collapsing and hungry carnivores become increasingly desperate. Large predators that once avoided human settlements begin taking greater risks as their usual prey becomes scarce. Lions, leopards, and other dangerous animals that normally maintain respectful distances from human camps start probing closer to settlements as desperation drives them to consider humans as potential prey. A well-maintained fire perimeter creates a barrier that most animals won't cross, effectively expanding your safe living space beyond the immediate reach of weapons. The combination of light, heat, smoke, and crackling sounds triggers deep-seated instinctual fears in most predators, creating a psychological barrier as effective as any physical fortification. You're using controlled fire to project power and safety far beyond your actual physical capabilities. While other human species also relied on fire for survival, you've turned it into a fully integrated survival system: light source, food processor, predator barrier, and productivity engine. Fire becomes your light source, your food processor, your workshop heater, your predator deterrent, and your social gathering point, all rolled into one essential tool. You're essentially running a Stone Age industrial complex powered entirely by controlled combustion, with different fires serving specialized functions within your survival infrastructure. Fire allows you to process fish more effectively, extracting maximum nutrition from your new primary food source through techniques that wouldn't be possible with raw consumption. Smoking fish over low fires preserves protein for future use, while cooking fish stews in containers heated by fire-warmed stones maximizes the nutritional value of each catch. You're turning your reliable fish supply into an even more efficient survival resource through thermal processing techniques. The smoking process removes moisture that bacteria need to spoil the meat, essentially creating a Stone Age version of emergency food storage. These preserved fish stores become crucial backup resources during the worst periods of the volcanic winter, when even the concentrated fish in your waterholes become harder to catch due to extreme weather conditions or increased competition from other desperate animals. You learn to create different types of smoke for different preservation purposes, using green wood for slow, cool smoking that preserves without overcooking, and dry wood for hot smoking that cooks while preserving. The knowledge of which woods produce the best preservative smoke becomes as important as knowing which stones make the best arrow points. The social aspects of fire, gathering around hearths for warmth and light, strengthen the group cooperation that becomes essential for survival during the extended crisis. Fire serves as the social hub where information gets shared, survival strategies get discussed, and group bonds get reinforced during the long, dark evenings. The psychological benefits of controlled fire become as important as the practical ones for maintaining group morale through years of harsh conditions. Around the evening fires, knowledge transfers from older to younger members about fire management, cooking techniques, and food preservation methods. Children learn by watching and gradually participating in fire-related tasks, absorbing the complex skills that will determine their future survival chances. The fire circle becomes humanity's first classroom, where survival knowledge gets transmitted across generations through direct observation and practice. Your fire mastery during the volcanic winter represents the foundation of technological civilization that will eventually separate your species from all others. The advanced fire control techniques developed during humanity's darkest hour will evolve into metallurgy, ceramics, and eventually every industrial process that requires controlled heat. What begins as desperate survival innovation becomes the cornerstone of human technological dominance that will reshape the entire planet. While some human populations retreat to familiar refuges during the volcanic winter, your group pioneers one of the most counterintuitive survival strategies in history. Instead of waiting for temporary escape routes created by occasional rains, like every sensible species on Earth, you decide to follow seasonal rivers during the worst drought conditions imaginable. You're essentially using environmental disaster as your personal migration highway system. This Blue Highways strategy turns conventional survival wisdom completely upside down. Where others see drought as a barrier to movement, you see it as a roadmap to resources. It's like using a biological GPS that only provides directions during apocalyptic scenarios, and somehow it works better than any other navigation system available to Stone Age populations. Picture yourself standing at the edge of what used to be the Middle Sun River in central India. The flowing waterway your ancestors knew for thousands of years has transformed into a chain of isolated pools connected by dry channels like a broken necklace of survival opportunities scattered across the transformed landscape. While other human species see this as environmental collapse requiring defensive strategies, you see it as a highway system designed specifically for desperate times. Seasonal rivers function as pumps that siphon populations out along channels from one waterhole to another, creating a transportation network that operates precisely when other species are stuck waiting for better conditions. You're essentially hitchhiking on drought, using the worst environmental conditions as your ticket to territories that nobody else can reach. The strategy requires abandoning every instinct that tells you to stay put during dangerous times. This isn't random wandering through the post-Toba wasteland, hoping to stumble across water before you die of thirst. The Blue Highways strategy requires reading the landscape like the world's most important survival manual, developing detailed knowledge of watershed patterns that most humans never bother to learn. You become experts at predicting which valleys catch rain when it occasionally falls, and how underground springs behave during extended dry periods that last for years. You develop sophisticated methods for reading landscape features in ways that other species may not have systematized. Your groups become geological detectives, learning to read subtle terrain features that reveal where temporary rivers will flow months before they actually appear. You study the way valleys slope, analyzing how different rock formations affect water retention, and identifying which types of vegetation indicate permanent versus seasonal water sources. This knowledge becomes more valuable than any tool technology during the extended crisis. You create lightweight, portable tool kits specifically designed for constant movement along these water routes. Everything you own must fit into a traveling pack that won't slow you down during long migrations between increasingly distant water sources. The Blue Highways demand nomadic perfection, you're living like the world's first ultralight backpackers. Except failure means species extinction rather than just an uncomfortable camping experience. The strategy requires abandoning the territorial thinking that dominates other human species throughout their evolutionary history. While your Neanderthal cousins migrate seasonally within established territories they've known for generations, following familiar routes between reliable resource locations, you're exploring entirely new landscapes every few months. They're taking the interstate between known destinations. You're bushwhacking through uncharted territory where the map changes constantly. Your social networks become the internet of the Stone Age, facilitating information sharing about distant water sources and migration routes across hundreds of kilometers of dangerous terrain. Archaeological evidence shows Middle Stone Age trade networks spanning 100 and 340 kilometers, proving that sophisticated long-distance communication systems already existed well before Toba struck. The volcanic winter simply transforms these networks from useful conveniences into essential survival infrastructure. The network operates through a sophisticated system of human messengers who follow the same blue highway routes, carrying information instead of trade goods. Groups split and rejoin along water routes like a constantly reshuffling deck of survival cards, with each encounter becoming an opportunity to exchange crucial intelligence about environmental conditions. When one group discovers a particularly rich waterhole or develops a new survival technique, word spreads through the network within weeks. You develop standardized communication methods for sharing complex geographical information across vast distances between groups who speak different dialects. Using combinations of gestures, simple drawings scratched in sand or ash, and vocalizations that could be understood across different groups, you transmit survival-critical information about water, terrain, and resources availability to groups from distant regions you rarely met. These communication protocols become increasingly sophisticated as the network expands. You develop specific hand signals for indicating water quality, depth, and seasonal reliability. Simple rock cairns mark safe camping spots and warn of dangerous areas. Scratched symbols in prominent locations indicate direction and distance to water sources, creating the world's first highway signs for nomadic populations. This information exchange system allows survival innovations to spread across the entire network, faster than environmental changes can overwhelm local populations. A fishing technique developed in one river valley reaches groups hundreds of kilometers away within a single seasonal cycle, giving everyone access to the best survival strategies discovered anywhere in the network. The Blue Highway's strategy works because you're willing to follow water wherever it leads, even into completely unknown territories that might be crawling with unfamiliar predators or completely devoid of recognizable food sources. Other human species tend to retreat to familiar refugia during environmental stress, sticking to territories they understand even when those areas can no longer support them. You treat environmental stress as an opportunity to discover new refugia that nobody else has found yet, essentially using global catastrophe as an excuse for extreme exploration. While others are playing defense against the volcanic winter, you're playing offense against the transformed environment, actively seeking out opportunities that crisis conditions create. Mobile groups serve as the postal service of the volcanic winter, carrying news of successful survival techniques between distant populations scattered across the transformed landscape. These human messengers risk their lives traveling through dangerous territory to maintain communication links that keep the entire network functioning. The messaging system becomes incredibly sophisticated as the crisis continues. Messengers carry standardized packets of information including resource maps, seasonal timing data, technological innovations, and social protocols for interaction between unfamiliar groups. They memorize complex verbal messages that preserve precise technical details about tool-making, food processing, and environmental observation techniques. Unlike the Neanderthals who solved territorial conflicts through strength and dominance, essentially settling disputes through prehistoric cage matches, you solve them through cooperation and resource sharing that benefits everyone involved. You prefer making out a deal over fighting to the death over exclusive access rights. This collaborative approach allows the entire network to survive when competitive approaches would lead to mutual destruction during resource scarcity. Your willingness to help other groups creates reciprocal relationships that function like a Stone Age insurance policy, providing security against local disasters through mutual aid agreements. You develop sophisticated protocols for resource sharing that prevent conflicts before they start. Groups establish rotation schedules for accessing prime fishing spots, share the labor of maintaining water sources during dry periods, and coordinate hunting activities to prevent overexploitation of limited game populations. These agreements become the foundation for the complex social contracts that will eventually define human civilization. You might share fishing techniques with a group this season and receive new arrow-making methods from them the next, creating a trading network for survival innovations that operates alongside the migration system. The blue highways become a marketplace for technological advancement, turning crisis into opportunity for rapid cultural evolution that outpaces genetic adaptation. The drought-following strategy proves that sometimes the best defense against environmental catastrophe is a good offense against the environment itself. While other species tend to remain within known territories during the volcanic winter, passively waiting for conditions to improve, you're actively using the disaster to explore and colonize new territories that become available as other populations retreat. This mobility strategy explains how your species eventually reaches environments that other human species never discover, from Arctic tundra to tropical islands. The skills developed during the volcanic winter, reading unfamiliar landscapes, maintaining social networks across vast distances, adapting quickly to completely new environments, become the foundation for humanity's global expansion out of Africa, and eventually to every continent on Earth. The crisis period migration patterns establish the pathways that your descendants will follow to colonize everywhere from Siberian tundra to Australian deserts. What begins as desperate survival strategy during humanity's darkest hour evolves into the blueprint for becoming the most widely distributed species in Earth's history. While your Denisovan cousins master specific high-altitude environments, and your Neanderthal relatives perfect cold-weather survival in particular regions, you're becoming masters of movement itself across any environment. Your superpower isn't adaptation to any particular habitat. It's the ability to adapt to any environment, anywhere, anytime, under any conditions. The Blue Highways strategy requires constant innovation as environmental conditions change unpredictably throughout the extended volcanic winter. You develop new techniques for finding water in increasingly arid landscapes, new methods for preserving food during long migrations between distant resources, and new social protocols for managing limited resources fairly among constantly shifting group compositions. Years of following the Blue Highways transform your cognitive abilities as much as your survival techniques. You develop enhanced spatial memory for tracking complex migration routes across hundreds of kilometers of changing terrain, improved social skills for managing cooperation across large networks of strangers with different cultural backgrounds, and superior environmental observation abilities for reading subtle landscape clues about water, weather, and resource availability. These enhanced cognitive abilities prove crucial when you eventually encounter other human species during migrations through their traditional territories. Your superior social networking skills give you advantages in negotiating access to resources, while your environmental reading abilities help you find alternative resources when negotiations fail completely. Most importantly, your willingness to share innovations often leads to peaceful coexistence rather than violent competition over territory, creating the foundation for the complex, multi-species interactions that will characterize human evolution for thousands of years. The blue highways become legendary among your populations, creating the first human stories about epic journeys and distant lands beyond the horizon. These narratives spread through your social networks like prehistoric adventure novels, inspiring other groups to attempt their own explorations and discoveries across previously unknown territories. You're not just surviving the volcanic winter, you're transforming it into humanity's first age of exploration and the foundation myths that will define your species' relationship with the planet for millennia to come. Your survival strategy emphasizes larger social networks compared to the more solitary Neanderthals. While they prefer small, tight-knit groups focused on immediate family units, you're busy building the Stone Age equivalent of a professional networking event. The difference is that instead of exchanging business cards, you're exchanging information about which water holes haven't dried up yet and where the fish are still biting. This networking approach proves crucial during the volcanic winter, when isolated groups simply don't have enough local resources to survive the extended crisis. Enhanced information sharing across groups provides access to distant resources through cooperation and trade. You develop sophisticated communication systems that allow critical survival data to move between groups with remarkable efficiency. Information travels through your networks with impressive speed, spreading news about resource locations and environmental changes across vast distances. Your information networks span distances that would take weeks to travel on foot. Yet somehow critical survival data moves between groups with remarkable efficiency. Better ability to weather local shortfalls through resource sharing and cooperation becomes your insurance policy against disaster. When one group's water hole dries up, they don't just sit around waiting to die like a particularly grim reality show. Instead, they pack up and move to where their network contacts have reported better conditions. It's the original support network, except membership is literally a matter of life and death. This reciprocal system means no single group bears the full weight of environmental catastrophe alone. Group cooperation allows for specialization. Some hunt, some gather, some make tools, some tend fires. Some become expert fish processors, others master tool making, others specialize in maintaining fires during constant dampness. This division of labor means you're not trying to be good at everything simultaneously, which frankly would be exhausting even without a volcanic winter making everything harder. The Neanderthals, meanwhile, tend to be individual Renaissance men and women, personally excellent at multiple skills, but missing the efficiency gains of true teamwork. Your approach creates specialists who can perfect particular techniques and then share that expertise across the entire network. Social technology becomes as important as stone technology for survival during the extended crisis. You're developing systems for decision-making, conflict resolution, and resource allocation that work across multiple groups. These aren't formal governments, obviously, but they're the social innovations that allow larger populations to function cohesively when conditions are terrible, and everyone's stress levels are through the roof. The ability to coordinate collective action proves as crucial as any physical tool in your survival toolkit. Unlike the Neanderthals who solve problems through individual strength and skill, you solve them through collective intelligence. When faced with a challenge, Neanderthals typically respond with some variation of "I will personally overcome this through superior physical capability." Your approach is more along the lines of "let's get 15 people together and figure out the smartest way to handle this." Both strategies work, but yours scales better when facing problems too large for any individual to solve alone. Your groups maintain contact across longer distances, creating early trade networks for essential resources. Archaeological evidence shows these networks spanning 140 to 340 kilometers during the Middle Stone Age, proving that long-distance communication existed well before anyone invented horses or roads. You're essentially running a Stone Age postal service, except instead of delivering packages, you're delivering survival information. Obsidian tools found hundreds of kilometers from their source locations demonstrate that your ancestors were moving materials and information across vast distances. Stone Age trade networks existed as early as 200,000 years ago, with obsidian transported over 160 kilometers in Kenya, proving these weren't emergency innovations, but established systems you could leverage during the crisis. By 74,000 years ago, you already possessed the capacity for complex language, far more advanced than that of the Neanderthals. This isn't just grunting and pointing, though there's certainly still plenty of that. You've developed the cognitive architecture for abstract communication, symbolic thinking, and the kind of complex information sharing that allows innovations to spread rapidly through populations. Recent genetic studies suggest humans had the cognitive capacity for language at least 135,000 years ago, meaning you've had tens of thousands of years to refine these communication skills. Around 100,000 years ago, there was a sudden burst of symbolic behavior including art, ochre use, and complex tools, suggesting that by Toba's time, you're actively using sophisticated language systems. Archaeological evidence shows you've been using sophisticated communication methods, including ochre signaling and symbolic markers, for thousands of years. The red ochre isn't just Stone Age makeup. You're using it to create visual signals, mark territories, and communicate complex information across distances. It's like having a primitive writing system, except instead of alphabet letters, you're working with colors and symbols. These durable materials serve as signaling media that can convey information even when groups aren't in direct contact. Neanderthals show far less evidence of complex symbolic thinking than what becomes routine in your populations. They can probably communicate about immediate, concrete things just fine. But the kind of abstract reasoning that lets you plan complex strategies, share detailed technical knowledge, and coordinate activities across multiple groups seems to be much more developed in your species during this period. Even as recently as 40,000 years ago, Neanderthals show almost no evidence of the symbolic thinking that becomes routine for your populations. The crisis may have accelerated the refinement of your communication systems, though this remains speculative given the archaeological evidence. Environmental pressure has a way of forcing rapid innovation, and when survival depends on sharing information quickly and accurately, communication systems tend to improve fast. It's possible that Toba's volcanic winter served as a pressure cooker for language development, though proving this archaeologically is challenging. Individual learning becomes especially adaptive when environments are in flux and novel innovations must be generated rapidly. Language was necessary to maintain exchange networks, And the complex survival strategies you're developing during Toba require sophisticated cultural transmission that only advanced communication can provide. Information about successful survival strategies spreads rapidly through your social networks using this advanced communication. When someone figures out a better way to process fish or a more effective hunting technique, that information doesn't stay localized. It moves through your networks like a beneficial virus, improving survival chances for populations hundreds of kilometers away from its origin. This rapid diffusion of innovations gives your entire species access to the best survival techniques developed anywhere within your communication range. You develop standardized signals and communication methods for coordinating between distant groups. These aren't random gestures or sounds. You're creating consistent, reliable ways to share complex information across space and time. Think of it as developing the protocols that allow your social network to function effectively, even when groups are separated by vast distances and harsh traveling conditions. Early humans used tied knots in string or small carved objects to keep track of numbers or agreements, creating primitive but effective information storage systems. Social networks typically comprise nested layers, ranging from the nuclear family through to the 1,500-strong ethnolinguistic tribe, providing multiple levels of information sharing and resource access. The network functions like an early warning system for environmental changes and resource opportunities. When conditions change in one area, that information propagates through your social connections, allowing other groups to prepare or adjust their strategies accordingly. You're essentially crowdsourcing survival intelligence across a geographic area larger than most modern countries. This distributed intelligence gathering provides advance warning about everything from changing water levels to animal migration patterns. This allows innovations like the waterhole strategy and Archery to spread faster among your populations. Your communication networks ensure that useful innovations diffuse rapidly through connected populations, multiplying the survival advantages across your entire species. It's technological transfer at Stone Age speed, which admittedly isn't very fast, but it's still faster than random chance. The bow and arrow technology, for instance, appears at multiple sites around the same time period, suggesting rapid information sharing across vast distances. Your willingness to help other groups creates reciprocal relationships that benefit everyone during harsh times. This isn't pure altruism. You help others because you know that someday you might need their help, and maintaining these relationships is essentially an investment in your own future survival. It's enlightened self-interest with Stone Age characteristics. You share preserved fish when their hunt fails. They provide fire materials when yours get wet. These reciprocal arrangements create safety nets that allow groups to take calculated risks they couldn't afford if they were completely isolated. The social cooperation approach proves more sustainable than the individual excellence approach of other species. When times are good, being individually superior might be sufficient. But during extended crises like volcanic winter, the groups that share resources, information, and innovations simply outlast the groups that rely primarily on individual capabilities, no matter how impressive those individual capabilities might be. The collective approach distributes risk across multiple groups while concentrating the benefits of innovation. Groups develop specialized roles within the larger network: scouts, tool makers, food processors, fire keepers. Instead of every group trying to be equally good at everything, you're allowing groups to develop particular expertise and then share the benefits across the network. It's the beginning of economic specialization, except instead of trading manufactured goods, you're trading survival skills and essential resources. This specialization allows for technological refinement that wouldn't be possible if every group had to maintain competency in every survival skill. Your descendants will carry this cooperation tendency into the global colonization that follows the volcanic winter. The social technologies you're developing during this crisis period won't disappear when conditions improve. Instead, they'll become part of your species' standard operating procedure, providing the foundation for the complex societies that eventually spread across every continent on the planet. The networking skills you're perfecting during Toba's aftermath will eventually enable the coordination of construction projects, agricultural systems, and trade networks spanning thousands of kilometers. The network approach allows rapid adaptation when environmental conditions change unexpectedly. When something shifts in your environment, you don't have to figure out the optimal response through trial and error. You can tap into the collective experience of multiple groups, finding solutions faster and with less risk than isolated populations attempting to solve the same problems independently. This collective problem-solving capability becomes increasingly important as you encounter new environments during your eventual global dispersal. Social bonds formed during crisis create lasting alliances that strengthen the entire population's survival chances. The relationships you're building now, under the worst possible conditions, are creating social infrastructure that will persist long after the volcanic winter ends. These aren't temporary alliances of convenience. They're the foundation of the social systems that will eventually allow your species to dominate the planet. The trust and cooperation patterns established during this crisis become templates for future social organization as your populations grow and spread across the globe. By year 3 of the volcanic winter, you've established new routines adapted to the perpetually gray world. What once felt like emergency measures have become your normal way of life. You wake up each morning not to the sun, but to the sound of someone feeding the communal fire that never goes out completely. The 5 centimeters of ash that fell across your Indian homeland has been reworked by wind and rain for years now, constantly shifting the landscape and creating new challenges every day. Dawn still comes, but it's a weak, gray light that never quite becomes true daylight. Think of the most overcast day you've ever experienced, then imagine that becomes every single day for years. The sky takes on that distinctive gray hue during the day and glows red at night. Nature's perpetual reminder that this isn't normal weather. Your body keeps trying to adjust to seasons that no longer exist, while the disrupted monsoon patterns mean you can never predict when water might arrive from the sky. Your typical day begins with the most important task: checking and maintaining fires that must never be allowed to die completely. Fire has evolved from a convenience to an absolute necessity in this world, where sunlight barely penetrates the ash-laden atmosphere. Every ember represents the difference between life and death in this cold, gray world. You've become an expert at reading flames, knowing exactly how much fuel to add, and when managing smoke in the sulfur-scented air that smells perpetually of rotten eggs. The fire management skills you're developing will become legendary among your descendants. Controlled burning, smoke management in enclosed spaces, and fuel conservation techniques that maximize heat output. The first real task is always water. Checking the water holes in your Middle Sun Valley, assessing fish populations, planning the day's harvest. The river systems that your ancestors depended on for 80,000 years have been transformed into scattered pools and seasonal channels. You know exactly which pools have the best fish, which ones are getting too shallow, and which new ones might have formed after recent ash-laden rains that taste of sulfur and grit. This isn't casual checking. This is scientific observation that would impress a modern ecologist, tracking water levels, fish behavior, and predicting which pools will last through the dry periods. Tool maintenance becomes crucial when replacement materials are scarce, and every implement must last. Your Levallois technique stone tools, the same sophisticated technology your cousins use in Africa, need constant attention through ray sharpening, hafting repairs, and edge maintenance. You can't just throw away a broken tool and make a new one like your ancestors did. Every piece of workable stone is precious. Every hour spent crafting represents significant investment. The volcanic ash makes stone harder to work, requiring new techniques for knapping and shaping. You develop repair techniques that stretch the life of tools far beyond their normal usage, creating composite tools from broken pieces and learning to work around chips and cracks. You spend more time processing food than hunting it. Every calorie must be extracted and preserved in this harsh environment, where large mammals have become thin and provide little fat. Fish bones get crushed for calcium, organ meat gets carefully portioned, and nothing edible gets wasted because you never know when the next meal is coming. Food processing becomes an art form of efficiency that would impress any modern survival expert, with smoking techniques that preserve fish for weeks and methods for extracting maximum nutrition from minimal resources. Your cooking technology maximizes energy extraction from whatever food sources remain available, turning previously inedible materials into usable calories through extended slow cooking methods around your carefully maintained fires. Social time around evening fires becomes essential for mental health during the endless gray months. These aren't just casual gatherings, but psychological survival sessions where the social cooperation networks that define your species get strengthened nightly. Stories get told, information gets shared about distant water sources and successful hunting techniques. Relationships get maintained across the extended networks that span hundreds of kilometers. Without television, social media, or books, human interaction becomes your primary entertainment and your main defense against depression. The conversations happening around these fires are laying the groundwork for human culture, with information flowing along the same networks that will eventually carry your species across continents. Children still play, but their games now involve practicing survival skills rather than purely recreational activities. Kids learn to identify good fishing spots by watching water clarity and fish behavior, practice fire maintenance with supervision, play games that teach resource sharing and cooperation. Their play looks remarkably similar to modern survival training programs, with mock hunting expeditions and tool-making competitions. Childhood has adapted to include the reality that these skills aren't optional but life-or-death necessities. The children developing these skills will be the ones who carry your species through the recovery period and beyond. Sleep patterns adjust to the weird light cycles. More communal sleeping for warmth and security in a world where temperatures have dropped 3 to 5 degrees globally. Privacy becomes less important than survival. Extended families huddle together not just for body heat, but for psychological comfort against the constant reminder that this gray world isn't natural. The sleeping arrangements you're developing create social bonds that will influence family structures for generations, with communal childrearing and shared responsibility becoming survival necessities. Whether watching becomes a survival skill, reading the subtle signs that distinguish one gray day from another in this world where normal seasonal patterns have disappeared. You learn to detect the tiny variations in ash density, wind patterns, and temperature that indicate changes in conditions. This isn't meteorology as a hobby. This is pattern recognition that determines whether you risk leaving shelter or stay put for another day, whether the fish will be active or sluggish, whether water sources might be replenished or further depleted. The ability to read these microchanges in an apparently unchanging environment becomes as crucial as tool making or fire maintenance. By year 5, what once seemed like crisis management has become your new normal way of life. The emergency protocols have evolved into sustainable systems that work despite the continued cooling and desiccation affecting your region. You're not just surviving the volcanic winter anymore, but living through it with increasingly sophisticated adaptations that set you apart from other human species. The crisis has become routine, and routine has become your path to long-term survival in a world that may stay gray for decades to come. Around year 7, you begin noticing subtle changes that signal the worst might be ending. The shifts are so gradual that you almost miss them at first. After years of living in a world where every day looks identical, your eyes have become trained to spot the tiniest variations in ash density, light quality, and atmospheric conditions. Today, the gray seems slightly lighter than yesterday. Tomorrow, the wind carries a different scent that doesn't smell entirely of sulfur and volcanic debris. These aren't dramatic transformations, but whispers of hope in a world that has forgotten what hope looks like. The changes are so minor that you question whether you're imagining them. But the consistency of these small improvements suggests that the atmospheric conditions that have dominated your world for 7 years are finally beginning to shift. The red glow at night becomes less intense, and the gray days occasionally show hints of actual blue sky breaking through the atmospheric haze that has defined your world. For the first time in years, you see patches of color that aren't gray, red, or ash brown. When actual blue appears through the volcanic aerosols, people stop their daily activities to stare at it like they're seeing magic performed before their eyes. Children who have never known blue sky point excitedly at these rare glimpses of what the world used to look like, asking questions about colors they've only heard described in stories. The blue patches are small and fleeting, appearing for minutes rather than hours, but they represent something profound. The stratospheric dust and aerosol clouds that have blocked sunlight for years are finally beginning to settle and dissipate. Plants that had gone dormant for years begin showing tiny signs of new growth in your Middle Sun Valley, where your ancestors have maintained continuous occupation for 80,000 years. Green shoots appear in places where nothing has grown since the eruption, emerging from soil that has been buried under volcanic ash and reworked by years of wind and rare rainfall. These aren't dramatic blooms, but small, tentative signs that the plant world is testing whether it's safe to emerge from survival mode. The C3 forests that disappeared are being replaced by C4 grasslands, creating a completely different ecosystem from what your ancestors knew. This vegetation shift represents permanent ecological change rather than temporary disruption, transforming your familiar landscape into something that will require new survival strategies and knowledge. Fish populations in the waterholes start increasing as aquatic ecosystems slowly recover from years of ash contamination and disrupted food chains that have defined survival in your region. The pools that sustained you through the worst years now support larger fish populations and more diverse species returning to areas they had abandoned during the crisis. You notice that fish behavior becomes more active, suggesting that water quality is improving and food sources are becoming more abundant in the recovering aquatic environments. The fish in a barrel strategy that saved your species begins evolving into more traditional fishing as the ecosystem stabilizes and water sources expand beyond the concentrated pools that provided your lifeline during the worst years. Temperature swings become more pronounced, bringing the return of actual seasonal variation for the first time since the eruption changed global climate patterns. Instead of the monotonous cold that has defined your world for years, you begin experiencing days that feel genuinely warm followed by nights that feel genuinely cool. Your body, which has adapted to constant gray cold and learned to function in temperatures 3 to 5 degrees lower than your ancestors experienced, starts remembering what normal temperature cycles feel like. The return of seasonal patterns allows you to begin planning activities around predictable weather changes rather than the constant uncertainty that has characterized survival planning for nearly a decade. Your population numbers, reduced to possibly 1,000 to 10,000 breeding individuals worldwide during the worst of the volcanic winter, begins stabilizing after years of decline and demographic uncertainty. The genetic bottleneck affecting all human species created a situation where everyone alive today descends from these survivors, who managed to adapt to the most challenging environmental conditions in human evolutionary history. This population reduction represents one of the closest calls your species has ever faced. But the stabilization suggests that your survival strategies are finally working effectively. Small groups that maintained contact through the social networks you developed during the crisis are beginning to reconnect and share resources more freely as travel becomes less dangerous and environmental conditions become more predictable. Different human populations begin recovering at different rates around 60,000 years ago, with some groups showing remarkable resilience while others struggle to adapt to changing conditions. Your behavioral flexibility, developed during the crisis years, gives you advantages during recovery that more specialized human species lack. While other groups struggle to adapt their survival strategies to improving conditions, you transition smoothly from crisis management to expansion planning. Your coastal populations show evidence of continued innovation and technology development throughout recovery, building on the adaptations developed during the worst years. The archery technology refined during the crisis becomes standard equipment for hunting in the recovering ecosystems. Fire management techniques developed for survival become sophisticated cooking methods that improve nutrition and food processing. The social cooperation networks that sustained you through the disaster become the foundation for more complex social organization. Layers of microscopic volcanic ash evidence allow precise dating of recovery phases, showing continuous occupation at key sites like Dhaba in your Middle Sun Valley throughout the entire cycle of eruption, crisis, and recovery. These tiny glass shards provide scientific proof that your ancestors never abandoned their territories, but adapted in place. The archaeological record shows that rather than fleeing to distant refugia, you developed local solutions to local problems. Some of your populations not only survive, but show intensified activity, suggesting successful adaptation rather than mere survival during the recovery period. Archaeological evidence indicates increased tool production, expanded settlement areas, and more sophisticated technology development. Rather than simply returning to pre-eruption lifestyles, you're building on the innovations forced by the crisis to create more advanced survival systems. The recovery period sees rapid spread of technologies developed during the crisis across your social networks, spanning hundreds of kilometers. The bow and arrow, fish processing techniques, fire management methods, and cooperative social structures spread quickly among recovering populations. Information sharing networks that sustained you through the worst years become highways for technological and cultural innovation during recovery. Your behavioral flexibility during the worst years sets you up for success during the recovery period in ways that more specialized human species cannot match. while they struggle to adapt their crisis survival methods to improving conditions. You seamlessly transition between survival modes based on changing environmental conditions. The same adaptability that allowed you to switch from hunting land mammals to processing fish when ecosystems collapsed now allows you to take advantage of recovering ecosystems while maintaining backup survival strategies. Your willingness to completely change lifestyle and technology when necessary proves to be the key advantage that will carry your species through recovery and into global expansion. The long volcanic winter is ending, but the world emerging from this gray cocoon is fundamentally different from the one that entered it 7 years ago. You're different too. The survival strategies developed during the crisis have deeply changed how your species approaches environmental challenges, creating behavioral patterns and technological innovations that will define human adaptability for millennia to come. These adaptations set the stage for the global expansion that will follow recovery. As your species carries the lessons learned during humanity's closest brush with extinction into new territories and environments around the world. The discovery of microscopic volcanic glass shards revolutionized our understanding of this survival story and transformed how archaeologists study ancient human responses to catastrophic events worldwide. These tiny fragments, smaller than the width of a human hair and invisible to the naked eye, provide the smoking gun evidence that connects your survival story to the Toba eruption with unprecedented precision. Before this discovery, scientists could only estimate when ancient sites might have been occupied relative to major volcanic events, leaving decades or centuries of uncertainty in their timelines, and creating heated debates about whether humans were even present during specific catastrophic periods. These glass fragments provide dating precision within weeks rather than millennia for archaeological sites, allowing researchers to pinpoint exactly when humans were present during and after the eruption. Traditional dating methods carry error rates of about 10%, meaning a site dated to 70,000 years ago could actually be anywhere from 63,000 to 77,000 years old. The volcanic glass signatures are so precise that they function like geological timestamps, marking the exact moment when Toba ash fell across your landscape. Chemical fingerprinting allows archaeologists to trace Toba ash to human occupation sites 9,000 kilometers away from the original eruption, proving that your ancestors were present across vast geographic areas when the disaster struck and survived its immediate effects. Each volcanic eruption creates glass with a unique chemical signature based on the specific composition of magma and local rock, like a geological ID card that can be matched across continents with laboratory precision. When researchers find glass fragments with Toba's distinctive chemical composition in archaeological layers, they know with absolute certainty that humans were living at that site when the ash fell, providing irrefutable evidence of human presence during the catastrophe. Continuous archaeological layers prove human occupation through the volcanic winter at multiple sites, demonstrating that your species didn't flee or go extinct, but adapted in place. The most compelling evidence comes from sites where archaeologists can excavate layers of human artifacts below the volcanic ash, mixed with the ash, and above the ash in unbroken sequence. This layering tells a clear story. People were there before the eruption, survived during the eruption, and continued living there after the eruption. Dhaba in the Middle Sun Valley provides the clearest evidence of your adaptation through Toba, with stone tools found in archaeological layers that span the eruption period without interruption. The same types of tools appear before and after the volcanic ash layer, indicating that the same population group survived the disaster and maintained their technological traditions. This site preserves 80,000 years of human occupation, making it one of the longest archaeological records of human presence anywhere in the world. Archaeological sites across the world show survival evidence, but many sites show evidence of human presence before and after major environmental events, requiring careful analysis of tool traditions and cultural stability to determine whether the same population survived or new groups moved in later. Dhaba's record shows no break in cultural tradition, proving that your ancestors weathered the storm rather than fleeing. The Dhaba site in India demonstrates 80,000 years of uninterrupted presence spanning the Toba event, providing archaeologists with a complete narrative of how your species survived the largest volcanic catastrophe in human evolutionary history. This remarkable archaeological record preserves evidence of the technological innovations, dietary adaptations, and social strategies that allowed your ancestors to not just survive, but thrive during one of the most challenging periods in human prehistory. The site serves as a testament to human adaptability and the power of behavioral flexibility in the face of environmental catastrophe, proving that your species possessed the resilience and intelligence necessary to weather disasters that would challenge even modern civilization. So here we are, 74,000 years later, descendants of the humans who refused to give up when the sky fell and the world turned gray. Your ancestors faced humanity's closest call not with panic, but with quiet innovation and stubborn adaptability. They proved that survival belongs not to the strongest or most specialized, but to those willing to completely reinvent themselves when the world changes overnight. Thank you for joining me on this gentle journey through the stranger corners of history. Until we meet again in another time and place, may your own adaptability prove as resilient as theirs, and may you remember that even the darkest winters eventually give way to spring.